Here we go. The carburetor is on the bench, ready to go. So, if you're doing carburetor work, it's kind of important to keep your area clean, kind of well organized, because these have some pretty small parts in them. And the inside of these need to stay relatively clean for them to work fine. I do not have a carburetor kit for this thing, so I'm just going to kind of wing it and try and save all these seals. It's probably going to have a rubber seal up inside here, and I bet it's going to be kind of crusty. So it's just an O-ring. I might have one on the shelf here somewhere, but we'll see if we can save her. So intake gasket, I usually, unless I'm putting these in like an ultrasonic tank or something like that, I usually don't mess with taking these off at all. Because it's already sealed on there. You take it off, you're going to risk screwing it up. So we don't want to do that. I don't think we need to mess with taking this off here, but we're going to do it anyway, just for shits and grins. So I'm going to take my 8mm. We'll just run these bolts out of here. Uh-oh. Just like that. Just run these guys out, and just to get it out of the way. Makes it a little bit easier to handle, I suppose. There we go. So, fun fact, snow blowers don't have an air cleaner on them. And they don't have an air cleaner because you're working with snow, of course. And if you've got a hot engine and snow blowing up on it, it's going to clog that air filter up. So they only use a screen on it. You figure wintertime, it's only snow on the ground, so man, you're not going to get a whole lot of dust flying around. So the air cleaner comes off. There's a bracket that holds that plastic deal that goes over the top of it. This is your choke right here, choke butterfly. So when you set your choke on it, boop, it closes that down, which restricts airflow to it, increases the fuel volume that's going into the engine, because a cold engine always needs more fuel to maintain its stoichiometric ratio. Let's get the bowl off of here. I've already picked out my beautiful 13mm wrench, so we're going to give this a little crank. This lower bolt should also, sometimes these double as a jet, so we're going to see what's going on there. It's going to leak a bunch of fuel out, which there's not a whole heck of a lot in there, so I'm not too worried about that. And yes, this one does double as a jet. So see, it's got that little hole in it. So it's got a little hole through it, and there's a little hole in the bottom. So it will pull fuel up from the bottom of this bowl. It pulls the fuel up in here through Venturi action, because the engine will create a vacuum and it just kind of pulls fuel up. So we'll take a look at that later. I want to see what's inside this bowl. This is your float bowl. So inside here there's going to be a float right there. The float meters how much fuel is going into the carburetor through the fuel inlet. So up under here where the float connects, there's a needle valve and a little seat. So they call that the needle and seat. This one seems to be moving fine. Oh, it's got a little pin in it that just fell out. This is supposed to fall out, and sometimes they don't come out, so it's actually a very good thing that that came out. And so we're going to pull this float out of here after that pin comes out. Be very careful pulling that out of there, because we've got the little needle valve on the bottom of that. So let's take a look at that needle valve. It doesn't look too bad. So this is the rubber style. So sometimes you'll have a rubber seat, and then the needle valve here is going to be like a brass or an aluminum kind of thing. But this one has the rubber style. It's still pliable and everything, so we can reuse that. I think that one's still good. And look at the bottom of that carburetor. That's actually in pretty good shape. So I think our only problem here was just some really old stale fuel. So the thing's been sitting for, I think about 3 years this thing's been sitting, hasn't run. So I'm happy to see that. So the ethanol hasn't gotten to it, which means that this little gasket in here, grab a pointing apparatus, which is going to be a little flathead screwdriver today. So this little rubber seal around the inside of here, the ethanol can break this down as well, because rubber components don't really like ethanol either. Of course, being a cheaper Chinese carburetor, they're going to use just the cheapest Buna N rubber that they can find. Up under here is, right inside there, I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if we can get you inside there. Hang on, let me grab a light. I got a flashlight. So, up inside there, you can see it's like a slotted screw. It's your main jet. So, we're going to get in there with a screwdriver, and we're going to take that guy out of there. So, we'll find a screwdriver that'll fit down in there, which is not that one. And I think my pointing screwdriver is probably going to be a little bit too small. Nope, that one actually will work perfectly. I like this screwdriver for carburetor work. So ease it on out of there. Just like that. So we'll pull this jet out of here. It just unthreads, and then you're going to tilt this down on top of your towel like that. And there's your main jet and emulsion tube all in one. So what happens in a carburetor, this will go up inside of the throat of the carburetor. So this is the intake, this bolts onto the intake manifold, so this is the outlet of the carburetor, this is the air intake of the carburetor. As the engine runs, it pulls a vacuum in, so it's going to pull air. Engines are just basically air pumps is all they are. So it pulls air through here, and then as it does that, it draws air over the top of this now, which creates a venturi action. So when you have a volume of air passing over the top, it's going to want to get more air. So it's going to take the path of least resistance, which happens to be another source of air down here, what it thinks is air, but it's actually fuel. So it's passing the air over the top, which is going to create a vacuum inside of this emulsion tube, and then venturi action up here will add fuel in to the engine. But we need to meter that fuel somehow, so they put a little tiny hole in on the bottom side of this thing. So if I get my light in there, you can probably see it. Yeah, there she goes. It's not so much of a tiny hole in this one, but yeah, this is just the main jet, so it's not going to have a little tiny hole like idle circuits will. This is going to be for the idle circuit, so if you have a machine that doesn't idle correctly, yeah, this is probably going to be clogged up, or if it goes up and down like that, idle circuit's clogged up 100% of the time. So that's nice and clear. I can see through it. So we're going to just kind of pop some brake cleaner through that, and I think this carburetor is going to be all set. So I like to use brake cleaner. Brake cleaner it's cheap, it's the best thing. Oh, actually, hang on. What I just noticed here, this is an idle circuit too. Okay. Shit, I didn't see that before. So this has got little tiny holes in the side of it. It's got little tiny holes on either side. So 2 sets of 4 little tiny holes. That's the idle circuit. This is going to be the main circuit. So this is the power circuit, idle circuit. It's an all-in-one kind of thing. So let's run some brake cleaner through this. So I'm just sticking this in here. Engage your safety squints. Just run some brake cleaner through this guy. Just like that. Oh get in there. And you can see it coming out of those little tiny holes. So as long as you can see brake cleaner coming out of those things, I wouldn't be too worried about them being clogged up. Because they're so small that if you get any sort of little debris in there or something, it's going to clog them up completely. So that's good. Sweet. So jet's all clean. Let's take this bowl here. And we're going to just a little dusting of brake cleaner inside that bowl. Just like that. And it's nice and shiny. Boy, this is an easy one. I was kind of hoping this thing would be all kinds of screwed up, but apparently I take relatively good care of my equipment here, so it doesn't get all gummed up inside and whatnot, even though I just leave, you know, fuel in it for 3 or 4 years or however long this thing's been sitting. So, clean this up in here a little bit. We should probably clean up the seat too. So the little seat where the needle valve goes in, sometimes those can get a little ridge of garbage sitting on the inside of them. Some corrosion, you know, maybe some debris from rotten fuel like this one's had in it. So let's clean that up. I'll show you a cool trick. Best trick of the century. So what you do is you go into your wife's bathroom and you grab yourself a Q-tip, regular old Q-tip. And then I use just some cheap polishing compound. So, ooh, that polishing compound is old, but that's okay. So you just put a little tiny dusting of polishing compound on there. You can use rubbing compound too. You don't want to put a whole lot in there because you don't want to clog it up. You know, the more you put in, the more you got to take out. So, one of them kind of things. So you're going to stick this, take your drill, you put your Q-tip in the end of the drill, clamp her down, like that, and you've got a seat cleaner. So that guy goes in there, just like that. Tighten her down a little more. And then you just give her a spin. Just like that. So it's going to take that brass on the inside and it's just going to polish it up like brand new. So you can see all the corrosion and tarnish that came off of that. So let's take a look inside there, see what it looks like now. Alright. Yep, so if you look inside there, that looks like high polished brass now. So all that debris, all of that garbage that was in there, it's all gone now. So, good. So let's run some brake cleaner through there. So we're going to go in through the fuel inlet. This is where we took the fuel line off of. We'll just run a little bit of brake cleaner through that. It just kind of clears out any of the, maybe the remaining polishing compound or whatever kind of garbage we broke loose in there. We'll kind of just run that out of there. We'll give her a spray here through the, this is going to be the primer. So this is going to shove, this is going to pressurize this fuel bowl and shove fuel up through that Venturi tube or that emulsion tube. So it gives it kind of a dollop of fuel so it can start right up. We'll run this through there until it comes out the other side. Whee! Okay. So that's clean. What else we got here? I don't think we've got an idle mix screw. Nope, this one's got set idle mixture, so it would have an idle mixture screw. If it did have one, it'd be right there. It's got an idle speed adjustment, which we don't really need to mess with that because this machine never really idles. So, you know, snow blowers are just kind of one and done. They just run as fast as they can. Find any little holes that you can find. Run some brake cleaner through them. That just kind of clears out any of the remaining crap that's inside of it. So now we can get into putting it back together. So here we go. So first off, we're going to put the float in. So we want to attach the needle valve. You remember this little guy there? We took a look at this too, and it looks fine. The rubber's pliable like before, and you want to watch the sides of it here because the ethanol can kind of tear up this aluminum sometimes. So these will get corroded in place and they'll stick. So it'll either not get any fuel or it'll just constantly dump fuel into the engine or out of the intake itself. So that looks fine. So we'll stick this little wire hanger deal, goes over this tab, just like that. And then I like to hold them upside down like this, and then put that needle valve just barely lines up with the inside of that seat. So that's going to be all together like that. And then this little pin that, remember, that fell right out. That guy's going to go in through this float, just like so. And then that'll kind of just hang out in there. So the bowl itself, when we put that on, that's going to hold that all together. I didn't happen to see which way it was supposed to go with in regards to that notch on the bottom, but I don't think it makes a difference because it's all the same inside. So I think this might be a casting maybe for a drain. If it's equipped with a drain, this one is not, so I don't think it really makes that much of a difference which way it goes on. Yeah, so we'll just stick that bowl on there. Make sure all your seals line up. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to put the main jet in, Dumas. So we can do that before we put it all together. So main jet goes in. We'll just give her a tighten. I'm sure a lot of people out there are like, hey, put the main jet in, you stupid ass. Tighten her down. Just give her a little crank. You don't want to over tighten it. You don't want to break the ears off of that either. That just turns into a real nightmare. Usually you have to replace the carburetor when that happens if you can't get the thing out of there. So, other jet, bolt, that all goes on here. The little gasket, there's a little gasket that holds everything together down there too. Get that together, give her a crank down. Don't want to go too tight with this either. So I'm going to set this to about a half an ugga-dugga, like that. So there's our carburetor. Got her all back together. Let's put our bracket on. It looks like there's like a little tab there so you can get it lined up. That's pretty neat. And they think of everything. So get the bracket on there and our air strainer filter. Air filter, maybe? Get that guy on there. Give her a tighten here. We'll just give her a half an ugga-dugga too. Just like that. Perfect. Alright. So, carburetor is back together. It seems to be relatively functional now too. So, I bet once we put some fresh fuel up in this guy, she's going to run like new. Uh-oh. Back at the machine, and as the assembly instructions always say, or the service manual because we always use those, assembly is reverse of removal. So we're going to go back in the steps that we took to take this thing apart. So that throttle linkage, or the governor linkage, that back where it was. Take that little spring, remember that little spring, take that little guy, put it into a little tiny hole on the back side of it, that little sucker. Get in there. There we go. So we've got the spring and throttle linkage all hooked up again. So there she be. Stick the carburetor back on there, and we've got our bolts. This is the one that we had to take out an 1/8 turn at a time, which once again assembly is reverse removal. So we've got to put it back in an 1/8 of a turn at a time. So in she goes. Booyah. Stick that bolt in there. So fun fact on this piece of machinery too. So like I said, this was at my shop, and it was toward the end of when I was open. We were kind of cleaning things out. Maybe it was toward the end. I don't remember. I had a printer up in the office, and the printer did me pretty well. It had a lot of use on it. It had a lifetime. Got it on sale somewhere, so it didn't really owe me anything. But man, what an inconvenience. When I'm trying to conduct business, I'm busier than hell, and this printer decided to just kind of take a random dump right in the middle of the day. So of course the printer upset me. Well, I needed to dispose of this printer after I had to run home and grab my home printer so I could print at work. I tossed it out into the shop and it broke. And then I don't remember what the whole situation was. I might have taken a video of it getting thrown out into the shop or something, and somebody said you should feed it to that snowblower. So yeah, that happened. So another repair that we need to do on this, so after I get everything back together here, we're going to get everything back together, we're going to see if it runs, and then we'll get into straightening out the lower blade on the front of this thing, because when I ran over all that printer debris, it got something caught up in there. You can probably hear it toward the end of the video. It got something caught down here and kind of bent things. So I need to get that straightened out, because when you go to scrape ice and stuff, so it leaves like just this little tiny trail of where it is scraping up the ice and the snow because the bottom side's bent. So let me get this thing back together, and then I'll get it all back together. We'll put some fresh fuel in it and see if it runs good, and then we'll straighten out that blade.